Luke chapter 18 and verse 9. I'll read a parable this morning. Luke chapter 18 and verse 9. And he spake this parable unto certain which trusted in themselves that they were righteous, and despised others. 2 men went up into the temple to pray, the one a Pharisee and the other a publican. The Pharisee stood and prayed thus with himself, God, I thank thee that I am not as other men are, extortioners, unjust, adulterers, or even as this publican. I fast twice in the week. I give tithes of all that I possess. And the publican, standing afar off, would not lift up his eyes unto heaven, but smote upon his breast, saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. I tell you, this man went down to his house justified rather than the other. For every one that exalteth himself shall be abased, and he that humbleth himself shall be exalted. Excuse me. There are 2 men in the parable, a very simple parable. And the 2 men within the parable really represent the 2 groups of mankind. It's really that simple. People try to make it more complicated than it really is. There's a group who stands, they trust in themselves, verse 9. They're proud of their righteousness. They despise others. And there's a group who has humbled their hearts before God and who has taken the claim of, Lord, be merciful to me, a sinner. Really only those 2 groups that make up the world. And the first man represents those, of course, who are righteous in their own eyes. And the other man, the publican, represents those who understand their condition before God. That is, before salvation, after salvation. We'll get into it. But there's really those 2 groups. And Jesus gives us a peek into the internal dialogue of these 2 men. Now, both of them could have been praying out loud, but it doesn't say they're praying out loud. Most of the time when you're alone and you pray, I bet you just pray quietly. I bet you don't pray out loud. Maybe you do. It doesn't matter. But they're both in the temple. They're both in a public place. They're both praying. And they both have these internal thoughts of what they are. And Christ gives us a little sneak peek into what they think they are. And with all the superficial talk and the superficial garb stripped away, you're revealed who these 2 men are. You're revealed the condition of these 2 men's heart. And after all, that's really what's important. That's really what God is interested in. Definitely what Jesus is interested in, because he gives the parable and that's what he says. And not only are they exposed by God for what they are, but we get to see who they think they are. And the question I have for you this morning is, who do you think you are? Who do you think you are? If you could see what people thought they were, you'd probably be disgusted. If you could get a peek into a politician's mind and see what he actually thinks he is. If you could get a sneak peek into Trump's mind and see what he thinks about himself. I saw this little clip of this interview. He goes, well, I think I'm a lot better looking than that guy. I said, we know you think that. You peek into Nancy Pelosi's mind. you just see the stock market, all the trades of the stock market going. You peek into Biden's mind, what he thinks of himself. There wouldn't be nothing. It'd just be like an echo chamber. You clap and the whole thing claps back for a millennium. You peek into the World Economic Forum's mind. The people who are deciding what your future is going to look like as a society. Those are those people. Wicked. One world, satanic, antichrist, all of it. It's all going to come from those people. But if you could look into people's minds and see what they think about themselves. Now, as spiritual as you may want to be this morning, you think too much about yourself. Because everybody does. Everybody thinks too much about themselves. Everybody paints themselves in the best light. When you tell a story about yourself to somebody else and the people who were there aren't there, I bet you come out in the best light when you tell it. That's just human nature. We put ourselves in the best light. And as much as we don't want to admit it, that's what we do. And with the Lord's help this morning, I want to look at these two men and see what we can learn from the Pharisee and the publican. Look down in verse 11. This thing right from the get-go just starts out wrong for the Pharisee. In the first few words, verse 11, the Pharisee stood and prayed thus with himself. Now, when you pray, you're supposed to pray with God. You're not supposed to pray with yourself. The Pharisee is self-consumed. He's concerned about himself, so he prays with himself. And when he says his prayer, there's not much of God in his prayer. He starts out with God so that he can save face as the religious hypocrite that he is. So he starts out and he says God. But you count how many times he says God versus how many times he says I. He says God, 1. I thank thee that I am not as other men are. Extortioners, unjust, adulterers, or even as this publican. I fast twice in the week. I give tithes of all that I possess. That's not a prayer toward God. That's a prayer toward yourself. That's a prayer toward himself. That's why Jesus says the Pharisee stood and prayed thus with himself. Look in the mirror. Looks good. Look at me. I do all these things. That's the heart of the Pharisee. The prayer highlights himself, doesn't highlight God. The prayer relies upon himself, doesn't rely upon God. That's the Pharisee's prayer. Prayer to the Pharisee is a formality. Look at Matthew chapter 6. Matthew chapter 6. Now, I'm not going to be too long this morning, but don't sit through this message this morning, please, and try to convince yourself how much you're not like the Pharisee this morning. We do that sometimes. You listen to preaching, you go through the whole thing. It's like, oh, nope. Yeah, nope, not me. Because I'll just let you in a little secret. We're all like the Pharisee a little bit. We all have the capability to be like the Pharisee. It's not, we preach on the Pharisee because we're not the Pharisee. Look at Matthew 6 and verse 5. Jesus' instruction on prayer. He says, and when thou prayest, thou shalt not be as the hypocrites are, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and in the corners of the streets, that they may be seen of men. That's their motive, to be seen of men. Verily I say unto you, they have their reward. What's their reward? Men might think they're spiritual. Now, who gives a flip what God thinks? But as long as these people think I'm spiritual, that's what matters. That's what the Pharisee is concerned with. Verse 6, but thou, when thou prayest, enter into thy closet, and when thou hast shut thy door, pray to thy Father which is in secret, and thy Father which seeth in secret shall reward thee openly. But when ye pray, use not vain repetitions, as the heathen do, for they think that they shall be heard for their much speaking. Prayer to the Pharisee has become a formality, a ritual. It's all through religion. It's all through Christian religions. Your Catholics and your Orthodox, they get into their rituals, their little things they do. And they do exactly what Jesus said not to do. How do you atone for your sins? The priest says, well, go down to the altar and say 5 Hail Marys. Well, go down there and say 3 Our Fathers. Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. If somebody comes to the meeting and says, Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, you know that's somebody who doesn't have much of a prayer life. Because that's not what prayer is. A prayer is you come before God and you talk with God. Right? And you're honest with God. You don't put on a show toward God in prayer. There's things that happen in prayer that you couldn't speak it outside of prayer. You wouldn't want anybody to hear it outside of prayer. Thoughts and things in your mind and in your heart that you could only come before God with. And the Pharisee says, Our Father which art in heaven, Hail Mary, full of grace. The publican is said to be standing afar off, but not the Pharisee. See, the Pharisee is right up there at the front of the synagogue. He walks to the front. He makes sure everybody sees him. And he prays loud. If he does pray out loud, he prays loud where everybody can hear him. Not the publican, though. The publican's off onto the side. He's afar off. He's worried about whether or not God sees him, not whether or not somebody sees him. And the Pharisee's prayer reveals the secret spiritual pride within his heart. That really is the problem with the Pharisee's prayer. It's prideful. He's proud about all the things that he doesn't do. There's a lot of Christians like that. Proud about the things that they don't do. Look at verse 11. He says, I am not as other men are. That's pretty bold. Nobody like me. I'm not an extortioner. I'm not unjust. I'm not an adulterer. And I'm not like this wicked publican. Now, the thing to remember is the things that the Pharisee doesn't do are things that the Pharisee shouldn't do. Do we agree on that? You shouldn't be unjust. You shouldn't be an extortioner. You shouldn't be an adulterer. And you shouldn't take advantage of people as the publicans did in that day. But you know what you also shouldn't do is be proud about what you're not doing. The pitfall in the Christian life, if you begin to dig in and you want to pattern your life in a way that Christ would be proud of, and you want to hold a testimony that speaks to the world, that shows that you're not like the world, because you're called not to be like the world. You're called not to love the world. You're called to be different from the world. All those things are good and right until it becomes a pride within the heart of how good and right you are. And if you've lived the Christian life any amount of time and the Lord has wrought some changes in your life, that's the temptation. That's the pitfall, is to become like the Pharisee. And to say, I don't do X, Y, Z. And you got a whole laundry list of what you don't do. Living for the Lord and not being in fellowship with the sinful world like He says you're not supposed to be is all good and right. But if it wasn't for the grace of God, you wouldn't even be in here this morning. If it wasn't for God continually coming after you and continually bringing you back into the fold and back into the fold, and the Holy Spirit continually within your heart reaching up and grabbing a hold of it while it tries to stray away, none of us would be in here this morning. All of our debt for any Christian life that we're living is in debt to Jesus Christ. We're indebted to God. We can't be proud about it at all. Now, the world looks at the church, they say, well, they're proud about, what they're doing. No, you're not proud about it. You shouldn't be proud about it. It's by the grace of God that you are where you are. Because you're no different than anybody else. There's no reason other than the grace of God that you're not out in a gutter somewhere with a needle sticking out of your arm. Really? Really? I hope we get that this morning. Because I'm talking after being saved. I'm talking after living the Christian life for a little while. You're living in the flesh. We live in this flesh. We fight this flesh. If you're fighting, you know you're fighting the Christian life. If you're not fighting, you're losing already. Maybe you're on your way there. But it's only by the grace of God that you're not in a drunken stupor right now, not knowing where you are. It's only by the grace of God that you have the life that you have. The Pharisee, he brings up the list of things that he doesn't struggle with. It's easy to boast about the things that you don't struggle with. Now, this parable, I think, gets perverted sometimes, and people say, well, that means you shouldn't have any judgment of right and wrong. Well, that's not the spirit of the parable at all. That, well, you don't ever say anything's right or wrong because, we're all sinners. That ain't it at all. Shall we continue in sin that grace may abound? God forbid, Paul says. So you're supposed to try to fix things up in your life, but you're not to be proud about it. It's easy to boast that you're not an adulterer when you've never committed adultery. Right? The Pharisee brings up the things he doesn't struggle with. You know what he doesn't bring up? He doesn't bring up pride. He doesn't say, I'm glad I'm not proud like other people, because his conscience would sear him too much. I'm glad I'm not a glutton like other people. I'm glad I'm not a glutton like other people. I'm glad I'm not lazy like some people are. God knows I'm never lazy. I'm a hard worker. Glad don't have a heart of hatred like other people have. Glad I'm not covetous like other people are. I'm glad I'm not impatient, bitter. The list goes on and on and on of all those sins that nobody can see but that everybody struggles with and has to fight against. Look down at verse 12. The Pharisee never brings up what he's not or what he is because he'd be too convicted about it. Verse 12, he's proud about what he is doing. Verse 12, I fast twice in the week and I give tithes of all that I possess. You notice he really ain't doing too much. 2 things on the list. What are you doing for the Lord? I got 2. I fast twice a week and I give tithes of all that I possess. Well, that's it? That's all you do? That's your work for the Lord? It ain't that hard to skip a meal twice a week. Some people do that and they don't even call it fasting. Ain't that hard to give tithes of all that you possess? How much tithes are you giving of all that you possess? Are you giving what the Lord wants you to give, or are you just giving, here's a penny off $1 million? It ain't much for a millionaire to drop $50 in the offering plate. But in Mark chapter, 12, the widow goes in there, she drops 2 mites. The Lord says, I like that 2 mites because that's all that she had. We don't give all we had. That's the service for the Lord, 2 things. And again, are those 2 things good things to do? Is it good to give tithes of all you possess? The Lord is pleased with that if it's done with a grateful heart. Is it good to fast? Yeah, some people could use a lot of fasting. They could fast for a long time. I like what some guy said about all these SNAP benefits going away. He said maybe these people won't eat for a little while. Because you look at all the statistics and everybody on SNAP, the women on SNAP are, 60 pounds more overweight than all the people who aren't on SNAP. He says, so it wouldn't do them that big of a deal if they didn't get their SNAP for a while. Fast for a little while. Now, this by no means exhausts the attributes of the Pharisee. Jesus spends all of Matthew 23 rebuking the Pharisee And we've read it before. I'm not going to go to it right now. But it's plain to see the difference between the publican and the Pharisee. The Pharisee, who does the Pharisee think he is? He thinks he's pretty good. He thinks he's quite the stuff. Look at verse 13. Verse 13, and the publican. We read a lot about the publicans in the Bible. I'll get y'all I'm going to give you a definition to say it better than I could say it. Publicans are local tax collectors under Rome's tax farming system. A chief publican purchased the right to collect taxes in a district, paying Rome sometimes in advance and recovering the sum by taxing the people, often with excess for profit. Though the role was legal and administrative, it became infamous for abuses and extortion, making publicans symbols of corruption and Roman oppression. I didn't really know much about a publican until I started looking it up, but that's what they would do. You'd have probably somebody with some money in the town, and he would be appointed as the chief publican. There's a chief publican in Luke chapter 19, we'll read in a minute, Zacchaeus. And that chief publican was to go out through his district or through his precinct, whatever it was, and he's to collect the amount of taxes that Rome has demanded of them. Now, the corrupt part of it is who knows how much he's already collected. He says Rome needs $19,000 when really they need 12. And so here he goes out over collecting what he shouldn't be over collecting. But some of the publicans, the chief publicans, were honest, and that's what you see in Zacchaeus. Look at chapter 19. Chapter 19 and verse 1, and Jesus entered and passed through Jericho. And behold, there was a man named Zacchaeus, which was a chief among the publicans, and he was rich. And you know the story. He climbs up the sycamore tree and come down to verse 8. And Zacchaeus stood and said unto the Lord, Behold, Lord, the half of my goods I give unto the poor. And if I've taken anything from any man by false accusation, I restore him fourfold. He said, when I go out there and collect these taxes, if I over-collect, I keep track of who I collect what from. And if I find out that I over-collected from so-and-so, Lord, I go back to that person. And if I took $20 over, I give them $80 back. I give them fourfold. Try to establish some trust in the chief publican of this town. And so Zacchaeus out there trying to be honest about it. But in our parable here, it's not a far cry to say that maybe this publican wasn't so honest about it. Maybe he over-collected more than he should have, and he figures, well, nobody's going to see it, so he pockets the money, and he does all right for himself by being a crook, by stealing from others. And Romans 3:23, for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. But the first thing you notice about this publican is the humility. The humility. Look at verse 13. The publican standing afar off. The Pharisees looking for the chief seats in the synagogues, what Jesus says, but the publican doesn't look for the chief seats. He just finds himself a little corner to get in. He wants to be in the house of God. He wants to be in the temple of God where God is, but he's not worried about having the chief seat. He knows he doesn't even deserve to be in there. He comes in and finds him a little corner to hide off into and to pray to God alone. Because he knows what he is before God. And in sincere humility of heart, he keeps his head down. Verse 13, he would not lift up so much as his eyes unto heaven. Not so that he can appear to be humble to everybody else, but because he's sincere and he knows that he's not even worthy of lifting his eyes toward a holy and just God because of how corrupt he is. And so he doesn't even lift his head up while he's in the temple praying. He just keeps his head down, off in a corner somewhere. The Pharisee saw him, had to have seen him. The Pharisee comes strutting in and saw that publican over in the corner. Said, I know why he's in here. I know what he's in here repenting of, wicked sinner. God, I don't do this, X, Y, Z. The publican beats upon his chest before God as an admission of guilt and sorrow for his sin. An admission of the root of where his sin comes from in the heart. And so he says, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. There's a song, it's me, O Lord, standing in the need of prayer. Not my brother, not my sister, but it's me, O Lord, standing in the need of prayer. That's the spirit the Christian ought to have. That's the spirit we ought to have. That's the spirit that the publican had. An admonition, an admission of the root of his sin. And then he pleads for the mercy of God, confessing what he is. He's a sinner. He knows he's done wrong. He knows he needs the mercy of God. He has no other merits to go on. He just says, Lord, be merciful to me, a sinner. Who you think you are, publican? Not Republican. Who you think you are, publican? I'm a sinner. That's what I am. A sinner in need of God's mercy. Now, you notice that the publican asks for mercy because he knows he needed it. Now, tell me what the Pharisee asked for. I'm going to get y'all 2 weeks in a row with that. He didn't ask for nothing. He didn't ask for nothing. You know why he doesn't ask for anything? Because he doesn't think he needs anything from the Lord. That's why he doesn't ask for anything. If you come to God in prayer and you need something, you think God can supply it, you'll ask for it. How come he doesn't ask for it? Because he doesn't think he needs it. What's the problem with the lost man? He doesn't think he needs any help. He's all right. There's a lot of stuff he doesn't do. I've never killed anybody. How many people I've met? Are you saved? No, I'm pretty good. I never killed anybody. I take care of my family. I pay my taxes. I do all right. No need at all from a just and holy God. You have no need at all? Nope. All these things I haven't done. I tell you what I do, though. I am a part of the church down the road. I'm actually even a member. Even been baptized. Even put money in the plate every week. But you don't need anything else from God. Nope. That's what I've given to God. That's where the lost world stands. Here's what I've given to God. You know what the world looks at the church, they say, what a bunch of Pharisees. You know who the Pharisee is? The Pharisee is the world. The Pharisee is the one that says, I have no need of a just and holy God because I've got it myself. I'm all right. Who you think you are this morning? Sounds so mean when I say it. Who you think you are? The Pharisee confesses all the things that he's not, but the publican confesses what he is. God doesn't care what you don't think you are. God wants you to say, here's what I am. Here's what I am. The publican says, I'm a sinner. What's he saying? I am an extortioner. Good. I am like the publican. I am the publican. I did take more than I should have. I'm guilty. I'm guilty. A lost man's always trying to find his way to justify himself. But look at who's really justified. Down in verse 14. Jesus says, I tell you this man went down to his house justified rather than the other. For every one that exalteth himself shall be abased, and he that humbleth himself shall be exalted. It's a pitfall in the Christian life. We looked at sanctification a couple weeks ago. Christ has made unto us wisdom, righteousness, sanctification, right? The setting aside of ourselves for His holy use, a desire to form our lives, be ye holy for I am holy. This just Christian discipleship. But there's such a pitfall in that. The devil get in there and get whispering in the Christian's ear saying, boy, you're really something. You've arrived. You're finally done growing. You're finally at the pinnacle of the Christian life. You know, you actually know your Bible now. You've made it. There's nothing else for you to do. Here's the top, Beulah land. And some people say, yeah, you know what? I think I have. I don't think I have much more to go. I can't really be told anything. What's the Pharisee do? He just spends all of his time despising others, proud of how much he's not like so-and-so. The race is never over. Look at Romans chapter 7. We all think all day long. That's the one thing never stop. Probably why you got to sleep, so your brain can shut off for a minute. But your thoughts are going all the time. You're thinking about all kinds of things. You're thinking about things right now that have nothing to do with this. You're thinking, you're taking in information all over the place. Everybody thinks something about themselves. And it's not wrong to recognize where God has brought you from. You know, it would have been a difference if the Pharisee got up and said, Lord, I thank you that I'm not an extortioner anymore. Lord, thank you that I'm not a drunkard anymore. Lord, thank you that I'm not XYZ anymore, because you brought me from it. That's a prayer. It ain't no prayer to say, thank you that I'm not like so-and-so. You know who never quit growing in the Christian life? Paul never quit. Paul never quit. He said, I'm not done until I'm gone. That's when I'm done. In Romans chapter 7, he goes through the back and forth of what the Christian life is within the mind, falling to the sins of the flesh and repenting and getting back in fellowship with God and not wanting to do certain things he's doing and not being able to do other things he wants to do because he's fighting the flesh. And he says in verse 22, for I delight in the law of God after the inward man. But I see another law in my members, warring against the law of my mind, and bringing me into captivity to the law of sin which is in my members. O wretched man that I am. Now, that doesn't sound like a Pharisee. O wretched man that I am. Paul, you've been saved 20 plus years. You're a missionary. You've started all these churches. You're a success in the Christian life, you know. People think of as a success. You're a success in the Christian life. What do you mean, oh wretched man that I am? You ought to be like the Pharisee. Glad you're not like all these other people. And Paul said, not me. I know what I am. Do you know what you are this morning? We puff ourselves up like an inflatable balloon. Just puff ourselves up. We're not all that we think we are. And we get proud. And if there's one thing the Lord hates more than extortioners and thieves and everything else, one thing He hates above all is pride. These 6 things that the Lord hates, pride is on the number 1 list. Pride. Verse 24, O wretched man that I am, who shall deliver me from the body of this death? I thank God. It's by the grace of God. I thank God through Jesus Christ our Lord. So then with the mind I myself serve the law of God, but with the flesh the law of sin. O wretched man that I am, the fight is never over. The growth in the Christian life is never over. It's continual until you hit the grave. Look at Luke 17. While you're turning there, those words that we just read come from the mouth of a used-to-be Pharisee. How about that? Here's Paul. He was Pharisee of the Pharisees. He's top dog. I mean, he said, if there's a Pharisee, I was one. But now what's his attitude? Now his attitude is, oh, wretched man that I am. That ain't the attitude of a Pharisee. What changed Paul? Jesus Christ changed Paul. What changes a lost man's mind to where he goes from, here's what I am, to saying, oh Lord, be merciful to me, a sinner? Jesus Christ changes his mind. What brings the Christian from getting puffed up in pride about how good he is to saying, Lord, be merciful to me, a sinner, still growing, still trying to do what I can? And it's Jesus Christ. It's the Spirit of Christ within us. Luke chapter 17 and verse 10. Even if you did everything perfect from right now on, you wouldn't have anything to boast about. Because we're servants. We're servants who have done that which was our duty to do. We don't go over and beyond. Verse 10, Luke 17:10. So likewise ye, when ye shall have done all those things which are commanded you, say, we are unprofitable servants. Now, I thought everybody gets a trophy. But you're supposed to feel good about, have some self-esteem. Be proud of yourself. He says, we are unprofitable servants. We have done that which was our duty to do. When we get to the judgment seat of Christ, the Christian's going to make it to the judgment seat of Christ, regardless of how he lives the Christian life. And it's not a judgment for salvation like we've covered dozens of times. It's a judgment on whether or not your motive was right in serving Christ. And when we get to that judgment, it ain't going to be how much did you do compared to how much did she do, compared to how much did the missionary do, to the pastor did, blah, 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 blah. Comparing yourselves among yourselves. It's going to be a judgment of why did you do what you did? When you were doing what you did, what spirit did you do it with? Did you do it with the spirit of the Pharisee? Did you hold a Pharisee's spirit for years and years on end? Because he says those rewards, they're going to burn up. Only what's done of what sort it is, of the right motive, is going to pass through that fire and come out on the other side as some gold and some silver and some precious stones. And we all fall into the Pharisees' mindset. And God help us to not be in it too long when we do fall into it, and to recognize it when we are in it. Let's grab a hymn book. We'll sing a closing hymn.